Hello, everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. This is your extra show for the week. My name is Cammy Bell. I'm your host, as always. It's been a minute since we've had a chance to be able to talk about Rangers, and we've got plenty of topics to be able to discuss as we look forward to this weekend's game. Going up to Dundee as we go to the Scott Foam Arena. Yeah, I'll never get used to calling it that as we take on Dundee in the 5:30 fixture on Sunday. Joining me this week to talk about all things Rangers is my very good friend from across the water, Laura Clark. Laura, thank you very much for coming on. It's been a wee while since I've had you on extra. However, the pleasure is mine.
Thank you very much for asking me, Cammy. You were saying it's been a minute since we talked about Rangers, the dreaded international break. It's definitely been a minute since you and I talked about Rangers, certainly in this more public forum where others can listen to us. So looking forward to getting into it and getting caught up.
Yeah, and the international break, Laura, has been interesting for quite a few Rangers players. Vlavklav Cherny scored an absolute peach in his last game against the Czech Republic. Yanis Hadji got in the score sheet for Romania. Hamza Egeman was also featuring for Morocco. But the standout story absolutely has to be Nico Raskin turning in a very valid and very well-deserved man-of-the-match performance for Belgium in their win over the Ukraine. So as much as I'm not a huge fan of the international break, I'm really not. I think someone told me the other day this will be the last one now until September, and I was really overjoyed to be able to hear that. But I'm also pleased to see the players being able to get away and represent our country is absolutely massive. For guys like Raskin, when you consider the talent in that Belgium team that he's played alongside, to have a standout performance like that, I'm absolutely delighted for him.
Yeah, I follow international football more closely. As you know, I go to all the Northern Ireland games. You're right, it's the last in-season, shall we say, international break. There'll be one in June, but you'll be on your holidays then and not thinking about football too much. You'll be too maybe thinking about the takeover, hopefully, and exciting stuff like the new strip coming out and stuff like that. But yeah, delighted for Nico Raskin, totally deserved. I think, despite how well he's been playing for us, I think we should recognise that it is probably still difficult in the league that we play in to get recognised by the so-called bigger nations, which obviously Belgium are. Obviously, the performances he's been putting in on a European stage will have massively helped that, but I was delighted to see him getting called up into the squad, and then I know he got an appearance off the bench in the first game, and I thought, well, hopefully that means he's going to start in the second game, and he did. And I watched the highlights of the game, and I know people have sort of clipped up his performance and stuff, and he looked completely at ease. I think we're now seeing the player that we thought we were buying. Cammy, I was really excited to see him come in, and then with injuries, and I think the previous manager didn't fancy him for a significant period of time, but he's now, really showing what he's all about, and that's both domestically on a European stage and now on an international stage, which can only be good for him, but it's obviously good for us. And I don't want to get carried away, but it's good to see players playing international football at a decent level. Players, obviously, Hamza Egeman getting his first call up as well, putting themselves in that shop window. And don't get me wrong, we'll want to enjoy them while they're at Rangers, Cammy, but there's been years where we've really not had any sellable assets, and we've talked about that, the fabled but not often seen player trading model. And I know anything can happen, injuries, either losses of form, but to have players who you can look at and say, realistically clubs are going to be interested in them. Raskin, obviously away playing international, Mohamed Diamande away playing international, JFD, obviously Hamza Egeman now in international football. So I think slowly signs of progress and things starting to go in the right direction and in the overall picture, even if maybe the immediate league position isn't what we would hope for.
No, and listen, you're totally right with this idea that we need to look at when players are at their maximum value. You're right, we need to enjoy them whilst they're here. We've spoken probably a little bit more, I think, in our Patreon site, Laura, about the central focus being more on Hamza Egeman. And the dial has somewhat shifted, I think, after this international break onto Raskin, because he went into the international break, obviously great in form, that fantastic goal at Parkhead. He has hit a really good run of form, and the injuries, as you rightly mentioned, have hampered him. But we are now seeing, I think, the true side of the player that we brought in. And we will have to ask ourselves questions when it comes to the summer if we do entertain offers for this. There might be the case that some clubs may look at our domestic performance and the fact that domestically this season will end up empty-handed as an opportunity to be able to come in and get those players. But Rangers have to box clever, I think, on any offers that they come in, that they have to be valuable to us if the player's going to move. Raskin's only 24, so he obviously does have a bright future, and a big part of any selling fee or purchase price, if you're the buying club, is not only where the player is now, but the potential of where they may get to. Eagleman, obviously a few years younger than Raskin, but equally, a huge, bright future in front of him. And it will be interesting to see if we do get any offers in for these guys come the end of this season and throughout the course of the window.
I think the position we are with Raskin at the minute, and I'm sure our listeners will correct me if I'm wrong, I think, Cammy, Raskin has 2 years left in his contract, so we're at that really significant summer now. I think, again, apologies if I'm wrong, but I think it's 2 years, so it's either a case of probably sell now, obviously at the right price, and I think the right price, if the takeover goes through, which seems obviously almost certain at this stage, we're probably in a better position in terms of what is the selling price. We don't maybe have to not give away the crown jewels at the first sign of an offer. We'll hopefully be in a wee bit of a stronger bargaining position, but at the same time we don't want to price ourselves out of it. But I think if he wasn't to go this summer, it would be a case of you would have to then give him a very significant contract, because we don't want to be in that position where we've been so many times in the past with other assets and assets that don't even come close to Nico Raskin in terms of players going out in a free. And I know that can happen at football clubs, all the powers with players now, but I think we're going to have a fairly significant decision with Raskin in the summer if his form continues, which I fully expect it to. He's had I think sort of from about Christmas time or maybe slightly before, his form really, really rocketed, and he's had a really strong 2025, and hopefully that can continue for the next couple of months into the summer. And then again, he could go away with Belgium in June and give another good account of himself, and that will just add more pounds onto the asking price. It's a bit of a frustration because he's been here a fairly significant period of time, and only now has he sort of, as we said, started to show the player that we thought we were buying, and then we could lose him. But I guess that's just the nature of the beast, and we're realistic. Unfortunately, we are a big club, but we're not in a big league, and we know that the attraction of moving down south into the English leagues and the money involved. But we'll just have to wait and see what happens. We've been this and having chats like this with players before. We're selling them for millions, and then something unforeseen can come to pass. So not getting too carried away. But if things continue in the same vein that they are, I think we'll have a significant decision to make with Nico in the summer.
Yeah, it will be interesting to wait and see what happens with some of the players coming in. And as you say, with the takeover pretty much done and dusted, then it will be a very interesting summer for sure. Laura, let's move away from the park just ever so slightly. We will return to it, but on Tuesday afternoon, Rangers released a statement which was in response to the UEFA disciplinary case outcome, where the outcome effectively was that Rangers has been served with a suspended closure of the Copeland stand should there be any repeat of racist and or discriminatory behaviour within the next 2 years. This was obviously in response to banners that were shown against Fenerbahce. This has been a huge talking point, I think, amongst Rangers fans, certainly that I talk to, and the kind of the wider Rangers support, as I've seen online and fans forums, etc. My tuppence worth, and I'm kind of keen to get your take on it as well. My tuppence worth is that it's incredibly difficult and I understand why people think like this. I'm not purposely saying that they're wrong, but I understand why people feel that there is a case against UEFA because they feel very much politically minded. They may feel towards a certain, a certain political leaning. I have absolutely no argument or truck with that. If anyone wants to have their opinion, I wholeheartedly support it. I may not agree with it, and that's life. That's just the way it goes. The issue that we have with regards taking action against UEFA, as I've seen people looking to be able to do, is there is literally nothing that you can do. It is very much their ball, and if they decide they want to take it away from you, they will very much do that. The other problem, as I see it, is that we are what I would probably say within the punishable bracket, where there's very little recourse or backlash. Should UEFA decide that they want to fine us or impose stand or stadia closure, however they want to be able to dictate the next course of action, because we're not in the big five leagues, we're not a threat to their money market, we can't create an uprising of generating a new European Super League. So I don't agree with it, but they will treat us differently. And that's just the realistic side of life. It will happen. It has happened previously. And I think it's going to continue to happen. For me, Laura, the most important thing here is I have always been able to go to Ibrox and feel almost a community amongst people who come from very, very different walks of life across the planet, but we have one love, and that is Rangers. And I've always felt a strong kinship towards that. And I'm sure many people listening will understand what I mean when I say that. No matter what you're going through within your own personal circumstances and whatever life is thrown at you, going to Ibrox is almost like a safe haven. It's a oasis away from whatever is happening to you personally. If you're going through some really, really horrendous times, then you can go to watch Rangers and it distracts you. If nothing else, it takes your mind off what's happening to you personally for 90 minutes. Now, as I say, I am not going to turn our show into any kind of form of political leaning. I don't think Scotland needs much more political division, if I'm being perfectly honest. So I understand why people feel that they will feel in certain ways. I just wish it just didn't happen in the ground. To that point, I also have got no ability and no background to be able to determine what UEFA believe to be racist or discriminatory. And that is very much, again, back to them and the ball being in their court. They will dictate what they see it as. And that's another conversation. So, whilst I understand there's anger from fans aimed towards some of the supporters who are bringing these banners in, how we can act responsibly. There's a part of me that I very much stand behind the singing section, the Union Bears, trying to bring in atmosphere, etc. Because I've been there myself. I've done it myself many moons ago. I know how hard it is. But for me, the most important thing we have to do now, Laura, is we have to be able to find a balance of supporting the team vocally in the right way, making sure that we don't err into any problematic areas that could then allow UEFA to come back to us. And for us really just to be able to use Ibrox for what it is, which is the love of a club that means everything to us. That's what I hope we can do going forward. But that's much easier said than done. We know how the Rangers support can be divided at times. I'm keen to kind of get your thoughts on this whole episode and where you are with it.
I think to go back to the start of this, I guess, what the banner meant. Is there discrepancy there in terms of what the banner meant? I guess that depends on your politics and your interpretation. But for me, the significant thing is here that your politics and interpretation are irrelevant, because really all that matters is UEFA's interpretation. Now, are UEFA a bit of a cabal? Is UEFA ruling, is it a bit of a kangaroo court? Yes, but that's the nature of the beast. And I've seen quite a few people saying, Now, on social media, now I will admit social media is not necessarily the greatest barometer of the overall thoughts of a support, but it's an opportunity where people can air their views and you can see them. So, is there a silent majority? I don't know, Cammy, and I'm not going to pretend to speak on behalf of the Rangers support or how everybody feels about this, because I just honestly can't gauge that. But I've seen quite a few people saying, the club should fight UEFA on this. I think for me, there's two things at play there. Firstly, the wording of the two statements that the club have released have showed that they don't want to fight UEFA on this, and they are somewhat in agreement, obviously. But I think secondly, and more significantly, and you touched on it yourself, is that you really can't fight UEFA on these things. It's their competition, it's their rules. Their rules and laws are written in a fairly vague manner to give them as much control and authority as possible. You can go and you can bring the best lawyers in the world and you can present your evidence, but this isn't Belfast Magistrates Court. It's a UEFA ruling, and it's their interpretation. I've seen people saying, well, the banner's not racist. Again, it's only all that matters here is UEFA's interpretation, and the charge is racist and or discriminatory, as you said. So, there's really nothing you can do against UEFA. All the powers with them, as you said, are we treated differently to other clubs within Europe? I would say yes, but UEFA are fully aware that we need them more than they need us. But even big European teams have been charged by UEFA, the likes, I think, Manchester City and Liverpool, their fans boo the Champions League anthem, and that's over UEFA charges. So the only, and again, does that mean that UEFA, are beyond being looked at? Not necessarily, but you would need to get a group of clubs to come together with any, to have any sort of force there. I think as a club, on your own, your only possible action is to withdraw from UEFA competitions, and let's be honest, that would be a ridiculous approach from any club financially to voluntarily withdraw themselves from UEFA competitions, particularly a club like ours in a domestic league that does not yield much money. So I think for me, and again, I'm not going to talk about the politics of it. Somebody who grew up in Northern Ireland, admittedly of a slightly younger generation, I'm quite good at keeping my politics out of places where I don't want it to be. And for me, the sporting environment, someone who's played sport all their life and, obviously supports Rangers, goes to Rangers, I don't bring my politics into sport, but that's just me. If you are somebody who feels differently or acts differently, that's entirely fair. I'm just laying out how I approach these things. But I think for me, the significance is now, Cammy, that the consequences of similar behaviours are known. So there's really no excuse now. We know the lay of the land. It's suspended for 2 years. For me, 2 years is a long time, I think. It's a lot of European games, and I am concerned about that. I know some people are very confident that that'll be the end of it. Now the consequences are known. There'll be no further behaviours. There could potentially be no banners, no singing, no pyro, for the between now and the end of this campaign and the start of the next campaign. But then as time moves on, let's be honest, UEFA are going to be looking at us more closely than ever. And if we step out of line once, we're looking at a full stand closure. You're talking what how many have been in the Copeland Cammy? About 8,000, would you say?
Yeah, about 8 to 9,000, yeah.
Yeah, so say what was it, £49 for the Bilbao ticket? Say next season or whatever, 8,000 at say £50 for the sake of my maths. You're losing out there on £400,000 worth of money, plus the sanctions and the penalties that you'd have to pay. But you have to look at the impact then of 8,000 bears. I just would worry about the impact that would have. Obviously, you can't speak on behalf of an entire support. You've said that yourself. We're all complex people. Despite what some other people would tell you, not all Rangers fans are made up the same way. We have different opinions and political persuasions and whatever it may be. So the animosity that would create from, I don't know, what, 7,500 fans who may not agree with, pyro or banners or whatever it may be, and they miss out on the opportunity to go to a really significant European game. That's my concern. Whether that comes to pass, I really hope it doesn't. But for me, I think 2 years is a significant period of time, and we're going to be under an even higher level of scrutiny than we already are, and that concerns me. I think that, and I hope I'm wrong, and maybe other people have more faith than I do, but I have grave concerns that we will not get through this 2 year period unscathed.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. We've not had our enemies to seek when it comes to being dobbed in, to use a good old Scottish phrase. If people feel that they are upset, then they'll be quick to run to UEFA about it. But we have to get our own house in order and not hand them the gun. So we need to make sure that, as I say, we keep ourselves clean with it. I think you've hit on a great point in terms of the 2 year period. I think that it could dissipate from people's memories pretty quickly. And I always tend to look at these things in seasons rather than years. So I always think about it's next season, but it's halfway through this year. And the longer that kind of goes, again, I just want to make sure that it does stay at the forefront of people's minds of how to be able to keep ourselves away from any potential stand closures or potentially even worse penalties. So we will have to wait and see what happens next. Laura, let's talk a little bit, because I've not had the opportunity to get your thoughts thus far on the reign of Barry Ferguson. We obviously went into the international break with a fantastic result at Parkhead. I think, as we've said already, even a win at Parkhead won't change much in terms of the overall picture of how this season is going to finish. But it's always nice to be able to go over there and get a result against them. Barry obviously had a fantastic result over 2 legs against Fenerbahce. Interesting to see some of the reaction that things have happened now, because Fenerbahce away was a fantastic result, but it was very, very well thought out tactically. Huge kudos to Ferguson and his coaching staff. The second half against Celtic was tough to watch because I think we started to tire, which was totally understandable. But up pops the Magic Moroccan as he thundered home a fantastic finish to give Rangers a 3-2 victory. We are going to talk about Dundee in just a moment as we head up there on Saturday, late Saturday afternoon. But just keen to get your thoughts on Barry, how you feel it's been shaping up thus far. And listen, let's get the question out of the way as well. Do you think he could be in the running to take the job on permanently?
I think, from my point of view, I'm not somebody who rewrites history. I'll put my hands up. Barry, growing up, was my favourite Ranger. I'm literally sitting in a room with a picture of him on the wall here that says, "To Laura from your favourite Ranger," and it's signed by Barry Ferguson. But I did have concerns about him coming in on an interim basis. Obviously not managed for a significant period of time, not managed at the highest level, but I was sort of thinking, we are the type of side who, regardless of who comes in, we do get a bit of a bounce. And to be honest, the most significant thing for me, Cammy, was we needed that feel good factor back. And I thought, I'm concerning myself with is Barry, that we know Barry the player, does he maybe have the emotional intelligence to be a football manager? I wasn't sure, to be quite free and frank, but I thought, he will get that connection back with the fans, and we know that that's so significant. And I know that that's a bit of a cliche for a lot of people, but he understands what Rangers is, and I think quite often Philippe Clement as much as he had a great start, he didn't necessarily understand what Rangers is, and there were certain periods of time where I think that was quite apparent. Obviously, the Queen's Park defeat, I don't think he necessarily realised just the significance of that result. And I think it was actually, obviously, our own David Edgar. He ended up asking him in the press conference, because I think that David appreciated it being in the room with him, that the manager then didn't quite realise the significance of it. I thought, well, Barry will get the players playing for him. He will create that connection with the fans again, and that has come to pass. I was actually quite pleased with the backroom team in terms of, I think Neil McCann's a pretty underrated operator in terms of a coach. Obviously, great to see Griggsy back as well, but I don't know, it's quite hard because there's not maybe going to be anything tangible for Barry. Obviously, by the time he came in, we were knocked out of the Scottish Cup, Cammy, and there's not really an opportunity to win silverware. Obviously we're still in the Europa League, but we've won one European competition in our history, so that shows that it would be a fairly significant task to win the Europa League. Don't get me wrong, if he does it, geez, we can have a statue out the front of Ibrox, whether he wants the job permanently or not. I really don't care. He'd be an absolute Rangers legend, more so than he already is. But I don't know if he'll be in the conversation for the permanent position. That will be, obviously, we touched on it, the takeovers, 99.9% certain. It'll be up to the new owners and the new director of football to make a decision. If he continues to, if he continues to progress in Europe, the Athletic Club Bilbao are a very strong side, the likes of Nico Williams and stuff, Spanish international, great players. It would be a really significant result to knock them out, and obviously that would give him a wee bit more clout, if you like, for the position permanently. But I think he's probably very much treating it for what it is and how it's been sold to him, a short-term position, and he's just doing his best for us. Obviously, there's been one domestic blip. We'll see what the weekend brings and the following weeks, whether we can. I still have concerns about those domestic games that aren't against them, and then obviously the focus will entirely be on Europe. That's just human nature. But I've been pleased with what he's done so far, and personally, I don't think that he is the long-term answer. And you know what, even if he did win the Europa League, I still don't necessarily think that he would be the long-term answer. You just look at the likes of Chelsea and Roberto Di Matteo to see that getting starry-eyed and romantic isn't necessarily the long-term answer. But in the here and now, I couldn't really have asked for any more from him. I'm just disappointed for him that there's not the opportunity to realistically play for some silverware, because that opportunity had gone, and let's be honest, that's probably why he's in the seat. But happy with what he's given us thus far, and he's after having initial concerns, I've kind of been able to put those in a box and and not that I wouldn't have got behind him, that sounds wrong, but I didn't necessarily think that it would work, despite loving Barry as a player. I didn't know if Barry as the manager would be the answer. And all right, it's only till May, so I don't know about beyond that. What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think that encapsulates pretty much everything where I'm at as well, because I've said before on previous pods, one of the things that and I, similar to yourself, will not rewrite history. I was not overawed at the idea of Barry Ferguson coming into Rangers as interim head coach, or however they had dressed up the title. I thought it was needed, because there was players who had, for me, had lost their way. I think that they had lost belief in the manager and the systems and what he was trying to do, as had the fans, and the change had to be made, as you rightly say. And Barry could come in with a degree of, and I'm trying to say this, and please don't think I'm discrediting, but with a degree of simplicity, where he could bring players into positions where he and they felt they could get the best out of them. And that was the most important thing. And it was not to allow ourselves to get into that state of just thinking, look, let's just tick box the rest of the games of the season. We'll go out against Fenerbahce. They're a tough side, etc., but he's absolutely been able to dial into the players, and he's got the players believing in him. And there's plenty of players in there as well. We're not talking about a whole number of players who, come from Scotland who know of the Barry Ferguson legend. There's plenty of players in there who, by and large, will not have known what he's been able to achieve as a player, but they'll understand the passion from him when he talks to them, when he talks to them as a group. And that was something that was sorely missing, was being able just to remove the apathy and remove these lackluster, risk-averse performances from these players and inspire them. And I think that's the biggest compliment I can pay to him, is he's been able to get players playing in a more positive, a more bright, a more positive way. And he's been able to do that with his backroom staff executing some good systems, been able to pick up some of those areas that we weren't doing well in. Set pieces obviously been one of them. And as you rightly say, Neil McCann coming in. I've always liked Neil McCann as a pundit, because always thought he's always got some real insight within this, which is genuine. And it's quite clear that he certainly does have that footballing nous in terms of how he can steer players towards being able to see other parts of the game whilst it's in play as well. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens next. For me, and I didn't think I would get to this stage, so listeners, brace yourself. But I want to see Barry Ferguson come back as permanent manager of Rangers. I just don't think he's there yet. And I've said in a couple of pods, both on here and also on our Patreon site, that one of the things that I really want him to consider is, if he was to leave Rangers at the end of this season, is to stick in with the managerial approach and try and see if he can take that into his next steps. I think he can walk into the vast majority of clubs in Scotland now, with a few obvious exceptions, because his stock has risen in such a way that he's able to be considered for some of those roles. I think he has to do his due diligence and take the right role for him. I think if he is going to keep that backroom team together of McCann, Dodds, McGregor, then absolutely move as a unit and learn and grow and go on that journey all together. And if at some point he's able to come back with merit to come in and take the Rangers manager's job on permanently, then it would be a very, very interesting time. So he's absolutely convinced me that he has got the potential. I don't know if he's there yet, but again, as you rightly say, if Rangers wanted to do a GoFundMe for a statue of Barry Ferguson, Europa League winner, then you better believe I'll be putting money towards it. Let's talk about the next game, Laura. Up to Dundee on late Saturday afternoon, early evening. I always call it the evening kickoff, but technically it's 5:30. I know my mum would shout at me if I said that. Where Barry and the team have not had too many issues away from home. Another problem that he's fixed seems to be a little bit more at home that we're having some of the problems. But we're going up to face a Dundee side who are sitting 11th in the table. Personally speaking, if we're going to play on a Saturday, it has to be 3 o'clock. I'm always wary of the late or early kickoffs. I think they can sometimes be a banana skin. And yes, folks, that is the inherent gambler in me. But I'm hoping that Rangers can go and just take care of business pretty smoothly. We will have players, as we've already mentioned, who have featured across the international break, so they won't have had too much time off. They'll have come back to Scotland as recently as Wednesday. They'll have a couple of days in at the training ground, and then we're going to go up and face Dundee, who, like I say, need to be able to start getting points on the board. Personally, Laura, I am always a huge fan of beating a Tony Docherty side. If we were to beat Dundee on Saturday and it got him the sack, I would be delighted. But we have a job to do, and it's over to Barry and the team to continue on that run of away form and that strong level of performance. Because I think one thing that you can certainly say now about this Rangers team is, away from home for sure, we've established our baseline.
We have, yeah, and that's been the ongoing issue. for quite a few seasons now, the inability to put a run of form together domestically. I think for me, Dundee aren't a great side, as you say. Although admittedly their last game before the international break, they won the Dundee Derby 4-2. I think that was only maybe their third win since the turn of the year. Results have been hard to come by for them, but they always turn up against us, and I think their manager gets them well prepared against us. I don't know why that would be, Cammy, but there you are. I think for me the most interesting thing that I'm looking forward to seeing on Saturday, and I should have mentioned this when we were talking about Barry Ferguson. We've obviously seen the change of system the last 3 games. Obviously, the 2 Europa League games against Fenerbahce, and then at Parkhead, going to the 3-5-2 or the 5-3-2. Whatever way you want to describe it. But
could you call it? I'm channeling my inner Adam Thornton here. Could you call it a 3-2-3-2? A wide two from the back. I don't know, something like that. I would kind of call it. This is why I'm not a football tactician. But yeah, you're right. It's either a 5-3-2 or a 3-5-2 in terms of how he wants to approach it.
I think people know what I mean. 3 centre halves and 2 full backs. But anyway, obviously that's been the system, and I think kudos to Barry and his team for changing that, because I think at times we were crying out for that. That we needed a bit more solidity at the back, and we needed maybe that extra body in midfield that you're getting with Conor Barron, a flatter 3 rather than the sort of 2 8s and the 10 as it's been, and there's been fairly significant holes in the middle of the pitch. So I know that was sort of broached to the previous manager, and I can't remember verbatim exactly what he said, but basically I think he said that would just cause more confusion to change the formation, and how could I change it with only having 1 training session or 2 training sessions to train it. So that just showed his stubbornness, because obviously Barry and his team have been able to do it for the first Fenerbahce game, and look how successful that was. And I think it makes a lot of sense to play in that way against teams, obviously the other side of the city domestically, and then the European games where we would not have as much possession as we would as against the rest of our domestic opposition. So it'd be interesting for me to see on Saturday, will we revert back to that 4-3-3, because we would expect to have a significant amount more of the ball than we have in our last 3 games, or will he just continue to work with that approach in the hopes of improving it and building on it, with continuity and understanding and building relationships before European games? I honestly don't know. I think I'd probably be quite surprised to see 3 centre halves and the flat 3 on Saturday, but I guess the intrigue is what's interesting for me for a game. Let's be honest, we obviously we love to see Rangers, and it's great to see them back after an international break, but we've maybe found it a bit harder to be as interested in these league games because of the situation that we're in. But that's created a bit of intrigue for me, and obviously the form and that feel good factor, and I think a Saturday night game, it's just a wee bit of a different feel to it. So we'll see what it brings, but I would expect a routine win, and it's ironic that we've flipped reversed. Before you press record there, we were saying we'd probably be more worried about Hibs the week after at Ibrox, but and now it's the away form that we're not concerned about. But we'll see what Saturday brings. I'm just looking forward to having domestic football back, to be honest.
Yeah, I think for me, because as you rightly say, we won't look too further forward because we've got plenty of shows to come out before then. But with that, we've got a really horrendous run of fixtures really for the next 4 games after Dundee, because you rightly say we've got Hibs at Ibrox, then Bilbao at home, then we're away to Aberdeen, and then obviously away to Spain. And I think, to your point, no, Laura, I think he sticks with the system. I can't see as to why we wouldn't. I mean, I understand the counter argument, as you rightly say, in terms of how much possession you expect it to have, what the game will turn out like. You want to be able to try and play almost outside of your own third, because you want to kind of dominate the main part of your half and all of the opponents, because we expect to have the ball. And I think he uses it as an opportunity to just keep that system going. And even if he wants to tinker with it slightly or tweak it here or there, just to be able to think about those games that are coming up, I think it will be very, very interesting. I think it will be good to keep some of these players who have been on international duty, just to keep them ticking over. I think we are going to have to get to the stage, and I'm not going to go down the Clement route of sports science, but I also think we have to be conscious of their minutes, and we have to manage their minutes accordingly. So if we could make it as routine as we can, so that we can get some of those players some game time, but ideally not the full 90 minutes, and ideally not a full stretch, where we can allow some of the squad to be able to try and come into. I know that the most important thing is obviously to get the result, but I think now, as you rightly say, the optic has shifted into how he wants to approach the game as part of his setup, and yeah, it will be very, very interesting. I'm glad, because you've surmised it beautifully. We were almost at the stage now where these were just a series of dead rubbers, but now these games have started to mean something again, not because of the domestic situation, but purely because we're looking to try and see what he wants to be able to do with the system and how the players respond to it. That is going to be very, very interesting.
I think the thing, you would say, I think if the team came out and people would be like, what it's like when the team gets posted and, oh geez, 3 centre-backs away to Dundee, that seems needless. But when you think about it, we won that Fenerbahce game, and I remember, it was great in the night, and I thought, right, 4 weeks, 4 weeks now to the next European game. But in reality, now, as we sit in the last week of March, it's only 2 more games until then, this Dundee game and the Hibs game. So while I thought probably might flip back to the 4-3-3, as you say, as much as we hate to admit it, these games domestically don't mean a lot. So does he use them not as bounce games? That sounds wrong, but as an opportunity to improve that system, as you rightly say, to get a bit of continuity and approach, to build relationships, to maybe use guys who don't get as much time that you may need in the latter stages of a second leg. Who knows? And this is a prime opportunity to get the answers to those questions, I guess, in a more competitive environment than a behind closed doors friendly or whatever. So you've kind of flipped the thought in my own head. He might probably stick with the system in the interests of just keep them in that and get them through 2 more games, improving on it and working on it and tweaking it ahead of that first leg at Ibrox on the 10th of April.
Yeah, it's going to be here before you know it, as you rightly say as well. Listen, that will do us for this week, folks. Thank you very much for joining us. David will be back with the flagship on Monday to unpack the Dundee game. I will be back next week with you to look forward to a return to Ibrox against Hibs, as Laura and I have discussed. All it's left for me to do is to thank our executive producers, Mike Lee, Paul Myers. Thank you to you all for listening. We have missed you. I hope you've missed us. If you'd like to hear even more from us, please jump on over to our Patreon site, which is patreon.com/heart and hand. We've kept you entertained during the international break, and we'll continue to keep you entertained until the end of the season and far, far longer than that as well. And the most important thing for me to do is to thank my excellent guest today. Laura, you've been an absolute star. This is always why I'm keen to make sure that you get on the show, because you deliver sterling Nico Raskin-esque performances like this.
Thanks very much, Cammy. I'll send you that $5 later. Thanks for asking me on. Always enjoy talking about Rangers and coming on these shows. So thank you very much for the invite.
And we'll be back with you on Monday, folks. Thanks, everyone. Have a brilliant weekend, and we'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.